Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. I know it has been a few months since I last uploaded a video because the last year was a bit stressful. I took a bit off. I worked on a lot of different projects, and since my last video the channel grew a lot, so thanks to everybody subscribing, and we're now over 2,000 subscribers I think, so thanks a bunch to everybody subscribed. And if you're new here, welcome. I'm Daniel and we are learning in this channel about keyshot, about rendering, about industrial design, and today we're going to take a look at Rhino. And we're building a water kettle. Now it sounds exciting, but this looks like a nice water kettle. I just bought this and I thought it might be a good exercise to build this guy in Rhino. So this video is targeted towards people who already use Rhino. Maybe they want to be more proficient in modeling. So I'm not going over the basics. I want to make this video more specifically targeted towards industrial designers and maybe visual artists who want to build their own models. If you don't understand a tool that I'm using and I'm not describing it in too much detail, maybe take a look on YouTube and you will find definitely some answers there. I will describe the tools that I'm using as much as I can, but describing tools is very time consuming, so we want to go through this quickly. So this video should show you how I would go about modeling a 3D model for a product. And that doesn't mean an existing product. Right now we have an existing product, but this also means working from sketches, working without any existing data. So you can use those modeling techniques as well for your own products. If you want to look at the finished model, I link it down below. You can download it from my website. And yeah, I'm ready. I got my coffee. Take yours, and I'll see you inside. Right, so I'm in Rhino and I want to show you the finished model. So this is the finished product that we'll have. You should be able to see all the keystrokes that I'm using. I have an overlay, so that might make it easier for you to understand what keys I'm pressing. As I said, this is targeted towards industrial designers, so you can think of this being your own product. Again, you can download this from my website and you'll be able to use that in any scene that you like. But of course, it's more fun to do it yourself. So lean back, relax, enjoy, and build this model. So currently I am modeling from this live example here. So this could be your sketch. This could be a hard model that you have maybe built in the workshop. This could be a clay model that you have from your product. You don't really need this physical model. It really helps with measurements and proportions, of course. But I also have set up PureRef. I linked that down below as well. PureRef is a nice inspiration image gathering program. So I just put in all those images that I found online of the kettle, and I'm looking for specific angles. I'm looking for details such as the lower part. I'm looking for angles that you might not have usually. So of course I have this guy next to me. It helps a lot. But if you don't, just gather as much information of your product as you can, and you'll be able to look for those references during this process. I also found this side view, which we'll use in a second. Here are some dimensions as well. This helps as well, but I have measured it myself and they don't really add up. So I'll tell you the real measurements later on. All right, let's see what will be the challenge for this model. It is fairly easy if you look at it, but it will get complex as we go along. Especially the handle will be a very complex part. And of course, we want to have as many details as we can in order to make the render in the end more compelling and more realistic. But we'll start simple and just look at the overall shape and then add the details from there. All right, currently I am in Rhino. I'm in Rhino 7 right now. This is the newest version. It does not really matter which version you are, but we will use one tool which is Rhino 7 only. But the rest you can follow along with any version. I'm quickly talking about my Rhino setup. I usually have a personalized toolbar here. I am not going to use this one to make it easier for you to follow along, but I have set up a few other things. For example, I am working with the gumball. So if I have something here, you will see this axis appearing, and this just allows me to move along those different axes and also scale objects in different directions, rotate them. So this kind of makes my life a little bit easier. You can check on and off the gumball down below here, and I think in the Mac version it will be up in the upper toolbar somewhere. The second thing is I'm checking almost all of those check marks down below. These are the snapping tools basically. So what that means is if I do a new line here, it will snap to, for example, the end, the midpoint of a certain element, and make sure the project is off. So here you can see I'm able to draw from the midpoint. So I'm using those quite often, and make sure that OSnap is on, object snap is on, otherwise they will be grayed out and you'll not be able to check them. I'm not using Smart Track, it doesn't really work for my modeling style. I'm not using it because it interferes more with my modeling than it helps. But I will show you a few tricks that you can use in order to not use Smart Track but also have all the features. And the third thing you will see down here, I have a second window. Usually it looks like this. We have a lot of white space in here. So I'm moving some of those tabs up there, like display properties and materials, into a separate window and dock that down here. So I'm using the space much better. And in the display setting window, I can uncheck and check things like tangent edges, curves on off. So that helps me declutter the viewport sometimes to see things more clearly. So this really helps. All right, let's get rid of this and start modeling. So the cool thing about PureRef, I'm changing over to PureRef, I mentioned this side view. I can just highlight this and press Control Copy to go over to Rhino and Control V to paste this side view image. I'm going into the front view and it will ask me for the first cone of the picture, and just drawing this picture up here. This will be the image that we're modeling off from. Next, I want to get rid of this black background. And if you change from display to properties, go to material and scroll down, you can use a color mask. And this usually is black by default. And here I'll just alpha out this background so we can see it more clearly. Next, we want to make sure that this is the right scale. And as I said before, these dimensions are not really correct. They might be, but it's not. They're measured by some arbitrary points. I measured my cattle here, and I know that from the height of the cattle from here to down here is 160 millimeters. So what I'm doing is click line, polyline or normal line here, and just go to the 0 point. So we want to start at 0, type in 0, enter, and that will start us off in the 0 point. And then I'm typing in 160 in order to be constrained to 160 millimeters, and make sure you are working in millimeters, otherwise you won't be able to follow along. And next I'm holding shift, and this constrains me to the Z and X axis. So we want to have a straight line up, and next when I click, this line will be perfectly straight up and 160 millimeters long. All right, now we want to resize this image. So go to the left, go to the Move tool, and I'm seeing that I have Grid Snap on. I'm turning that off quickly, and just go to one of those corners and move that up to the end of the line. And next we want to scale the image, and we want to scale it in 2 dimensions. So go right click or long click on this scaling tool and scale 2D. Then, because we have the snapping tools enabled, we can snap to the end of the line, hold Shift again, and then select the lower part of the kettle. So now we are scaling this image along this axis basically. And when we snap to the lower point of the line, we are now sure that this image is perfectly scaled. And now we want to center it. So again, go to the single line, click once for the first point, and then I want to hold Shift and go over to the right side. Of course, we can zoom in and click once again. And now we have basically the middle of our kettle. And if we hold Shift, select all of them, we can move both of these to the left, and we have a midpoint that we can reference. So I can use this midpoint and snap it to the end of our previously created line. So now it is perfectly centered and we're ready to go model. One thing I want to do is create a new layer, call it Underlay, select the image, right click and change the object layer. And now we can lock this layer in order to make it non-selectable, so we can't move it accidentally. And also we can check the image on and off while we're working, so this is also quite helpful. All right, for our first element, I'm choosing this body part here. We already have this top line, but let's create another one. And we just start in the center because we want to revolve this around the center point. I'm going to create a second line and end it at the end point here as well. Then I'm going to right click in order to go back to the same tool. You can also hit the space bar. So let me hit the space bar. This gives you the last used tool. Also enter does the same thing, so you can use either one interchangeably. And I'm just clicking once, going down, and I'm overbuilding. So what that means is I don't have any edge here. So because this shape is rounded, I want to overbuild because I don't know where this will actually start. So this virtual edge, I don't really know where it is yet. I'm doing the same thing down here as well. So I'm overbuilding. And next I'm going to zoom in and find 2 points that are kind of defining the angle of this line, because I don't really have a tool where I can measure this angle perfectly. But this way, I'm pretty sure that this is the right angle. And now I can just go here and scale it up with holding Shift. And as you can see, at some point they intersect, and these are my virtual intersection points. Now I can go to the trim tool, trim those guys off, select the top one, and this is basically our general shape of the main body. All right, next we want to fillet those guys. Go to the curve tools, the fillet curve tool, and I'm thinking of, I think maybe 12 millimeters. I think that worked really well. And for the top one, hit again, I think we're gonna go for radius 100. Click once, click twice, and this will create this fillet. So I think that should be fine. Looks good. So people who are in industrial design or modeling, you probably heard of continuity and curve continuity. So I don't want to go too deep into this. Just know there is a difference between certain arrangements of fillets or transitions. So this means between 2 lines or surfaces, so we will have 2 lines, there's a transition, and there's 4 different continuities, and I've just found this on the internet. So these 4 different continuities are G1, G0, G1, G2, and G3. And I think those explain it quite well. So G0 means we have sharp edges. There is no transition happening. G1 is what we just did, is those fillets. And they are typically the fillets that you will find. The issue here is you might be having or getting those highlights at the point where they start, because they don't blend into these two surfaces smoothly. They are just tangent, so you might have some issues in the final render. So that's why we have curvature blend. So G2 is curvature, and this just means so G2 and G3 is a smoother transition into the fillet or the blend. So here it is explained a little bit more detailed. We'll have 1, 2, 3, or 4 CVs aligned to the other surface, and that just gives us more and more quality of this blend. But since we're working with straight lines, by default these are curvature already, because we will have 1, 2, 3, 4 CVs aligned. So I'm not bothering with creating curvature transitions here. There's no real difference in the final product then. But just so you know that there is differences in those blends, and if you don't work with completely straight lines, you want to make sure that your blends are curvature continuous. And just for an example, we can recreate this fillet down below as a curvature fillet. So it doesn't really change much, but we can try still. And I'll just show you how I would go about doing this. So what I'm doing is go to select. I'm selecting all the curves that I created. Right click on layer 1, change the object layer, and slowly double click to change the name to curves. So now, since this first layer is red, you can change the color here. It will highlight this much better, but we still are working on this black default layer, and that's because we want to see the difference between this transition and the one that we're creating. I can hide the underlay quickly, and what we want to do is go to curve tools. So I'm going up to the adjustable curve blend, and this will allow you to create curvature blends. Clicking once for the first line, once for the second line, and we'll get a pop-up window. And this will show you the difference between tangents in curvature. So with tangent, we will get 2 CV points, and with curvature, we'll get 3 of each. And now I can look at the original fillet, and while holding shift, I can click on one of the center points and kind of adjust this blend as best as I can, so that you cannot really get perfectly to this fillet. You will have to have a little bit more space in order to create a softer blend, but that looks good for me. So click OK, and now you have this original fillet that we can delete. Go to the curvature fillet and right click to change object layer. So now this is our curve blend. Okay. Now I'm highlighting all of this. Go to join, and for creating this body, I'm going to go to surface tools. There's a tool called revolve. And I'm choosing the revolve axis and click full circle in order to make a full 360-degree circle. So in the perspective viewport, right click and go to shaded or rendered mode, and this will show us what we created. Coffee break. And Dieter approves. All right, back to work. So I'm showing the underlay again. Go to the right, and we will hold off of creating the handle now. I think I'm going to go for the spout next, and similar what we just did, go to curve tools. I'm going to use a polyline now, and I'm just generally following along this line in the center. Right click, because now we can actually adjust this a bit better. So I can highlight this CV point, and because I have the gumball showing, I can just use this X and Z axis to move it around and adjust it according to the image. And this is again overbuilding, so we don't have edges in the final version, but I'm creating the general shape first and then blending those curves as a second step. And here I see that we have a little bit of a curve here as well. So I'm just adding another line to the front, somewhere like this, and join these guys to have this also later on. So next, I'm going to the fillet curves tool again. So we have a radius of 100. You can see if that is enough or it's too much. I'm thinking 80. This should be fine. I think down here we don't need more than 50. Yep, that's too much. Let's say I think 20 should be fine. Yeah, 20 looks good. And here as well, I think 50 should be fine. Yes. All right. So this will give us a little bit of a curve down at the end. Now we want to create the volume. And for that, I'm using the command pipe, but I'm not sure where. I think it's in the Solid Tools pipe, but I can show you how to use the command line. So just type in pipe up there, not even pipe, just PIP, and will pop up in this selection box. Just click enter to select or select this tool. So sometimes I'm using the command line when I know what I want, but I don't know where I can find it. You just type in the command. So now we can choose the thickness of our spout of the pipe, and I know it's, I think, 12 millimeters, so 6 millimeter radius. 6, enter, and enter as well. This will create the pipe around our sketch. So next I want to chop off this top part, go to the curve tools line, and I'm just creating a straight line with holding shift, select it and go to trim, and we're going to trim off this top part. And if you go back to the perspective, this gives us a nice rounded spout here in the end. Perfect. All right, next we want to create the top part. And for that, I'm going to the front view again. And we don't really see how deep it goes. We can go back to PureRef and see how this looks. So you can see it's going down in order to create some sort of free space for your fingers. So I think we can eyeball this quite well. So go to the polyline tool, and I'm just hitting grid snap on in order to just outline the general shape of this handle. All right, this is the very basic shape. I'm hitting explode in order to select this top line. In order to create this sloped shape on top, is we need to bend it down a little bit. So what we can do is change degree, change it from a 1 degree line to a 2 degree line, which gives us 3 points to interact with. I'm selecting both lines, select the corner and drag down a little bit, and that creates the perfect sloped curve here. All right, now I can select everything and join it again, and we can go to Surface Tools, Revolve, select the axis, and since we already selected the full circle, we just press Enter twice, and this creates our 3D surface. So now we have the handle almost ready. We don't have any fillets yet, so there's no rounding of those edges yet, and that's because I want to create the general shape first, and I also highlighted this here. So first, don't be afraid to rebuild. I didn't have to rebuild yet, but first shape, second refine, third detail, and the fourth is the structure of my model. So I think this is basically the outline of how I model. So right now we're in the shape section. Right, next is the top surface or the rest of the lid. For that, I want to see how the center looks. So the center of the lid is a swooped surface. So what I'm going to do is draw 2 lines and connect them with a curve blend. So let's do that. Go to single line, and I'm building it a little bit to the top so it doesn't interfere with what I built down there. So 3 millimeter line here, and then go somewhere you think it should start or end. I think it's maybe right about here. And I have grid snap on, so I know it's in a nice even distance from the top. And then hold shift. And what I'm doing is hit tab once in order to constrain again to the x-axis. And now my hand is free and I can choose any endpoint that I want the line to end. So here is a perfectly straight line. And now we want to create this curve blend. So left click, adjustable curve blend, hit the ends that you want to connect. Don't hit the other ends, otherwise they would connect. So go to curvature if it's not already there, hit OK. And this is now our curve for the surface of the lid. Hit join to join those curves. And what I'm doing now is hit once on the z-axis arrow of my gumball and hit 100 or 50 or something to move this up a little bit out of the way of anything else in my scene. I usually do it that way so I can just go -50 and it's again in the original position. So 50 up and that just moves this out of the way. Right now we want to see what the rest of the lid looks like. So I think here you can see that there's a step down, a step inwards, and then it covers the swooped surface that we just created. So let's just build this. We don't really have the measurements. I could do them, but it is up to us. I'll select the polyline, go to the end. I think we're gonna go 3 millimeters down, 3 millimeters to the left, and then just cover everything that we just created. So maybe 18 millimeters down. And I'm holding shift and press tab again in order to free my left hand up and then hit this end point here and then create the finished polyline with a right click. Right, this is our lid. I think we can join this now. And now if we need to make any adjustments, we can click on the show points in order to maybe just move some CVs around. So I think maybe if we need to make it a little bit shallower, we can move those up. We can move those two inwards a little bit maybe in order to create more space. Right, this is the finished side profile of the lid. So now let's revolve this, go to Surface Tools and hit Revolve, axis again, and full circle. So enter, enter, creates the full circle. Now let's see how it looks in 3D. So this is our lid. And now we want to create a space for the lid. Before we do this, we can look at some of the details that the main body has. So for example, the main body is made out of metal, but the lower part is plastic. So at some point it needs to change from metal to plastic, and that point is here. You can see the parting line. So we want to create this parting line in order to have a distinction between those materials. So go back to Rhino, and from the side view, what I'm doing is creating a line, which will be our literal parting line. So go to Curve Tools, create a single line, and we can start in the center. And if you press once, you can hit B for both sides. So this creates a line from the center of the line. Now, if you hit Shift and drag outwards, you'll be sure to cover your whole model. So hit once. The next step for me is to create the cut. But since in reality, those material cuts are always a little bit bigger than you think, so it will never be at 0, we want to create a little bit of a distance. So what I'm doing is hit offset curve and make sure that the cap is selected, cap flat, we need a flat cap, and just type in a small number like 0.2, and this creates a little bit of an offset or space between those materials, which is much closer to reality. This basically creates a rectangle. If we go to the perspective mode and go to Surface Tools and Extrude Straight, you will see that this will create a thin sheet. And now I will also want this extruded in both directions. So either click up here both sides or hit B. And I also want to overextend this. So this covers the whole base of the model. So now if I'm not happy with the cut position, I can move it up a little bit. And since this is completely solid, I can go to Solid Tools and go to the Boolean difference tool and make sure to set delete input to yes, hit once for the cutting part and right click to accept. And now we have this parting line. So this is now a completely straight line through, but it creates a nice differentiation between those parts later in your model. And next we want to give this a inside basically. So again, we're in the solid tools and we're gonna hit shell. And now we want to select the surfaces that we want to delete. So this top surface, and I want to have a thickness of 5 millimeters because the inside wall is, or the kettle is insulated. So the inside wall is offset off the outside wall by about 5 millimeters. So hit 5, enter. So now this creates this hollow body. So now we can see if our lid fits inside, which it does, if we model it correctly. But you can also see that we need another lip here. So in our inspiration images, reference images, you can see this lip. So we need to still model this. So we need to offset this 0.2 millimeters, this cut. So what we can do is go to the perspective and select the outside ring of our lid. So we can move this up a bit in order to make it more clear. I can go to offset curve, what we just did as well, and hit the edge corner of the lid. And since we already had a distance of 0.2, this is perfectly fine. Just click once. So now we can extrude this curve downwards, and we know that the height here, the lip is 3 millimeters in height. So we want to extrude it for 3.2 and make sure that solid is selected on 3.2, enter. And we have our cutting element. So we can move this down so it intersects again with our main model, and select the main model. Again, go to solid tools and Boolean difference, click the cutting tool and right click in order to accept. Now we have this inset, and now our lid perfectly fits into this gap. Another thing is you will see a lot of curves that you created for certain steps along the way. And sometimes they are a little bit in the way of working. So what I do from time to time is just select all the curves, go to the select curves, and right click to curves, change the object layer. Now you can hide this and you'll not be as distracted. So now you can see your model clearly. If you need them, they're still here, but with one click you can just hide them. But we're still working on the default layer. All right, let's add some details to what we just created. For example, the spout needs to have a thickness as well. So what I'm doing here is type in cap as a tool, and I think this should be in the solid tools. So solid tools, and right next to shell, you will find cap planar holes, which I'll just love to type in cap and enter. And this just basically seals all planar holes that we would have. So this is now a solid. And with the solid, we can also shell it. So click on shell, this newly created top surface, and I want to have a thickness of maybe 0.5 millimeter. Since it's made of steel, it can be fairly thin. All right, let's add some fillets now to some of our elements. So for example, this is not perfect yet. You will see in our reference images that the lid is quite soft down here. So let's do this. So go to solid tools, we need to fillet edges. And for this, we need a quite big fillet. So I think maybe 3 millimeters for now. Let's see how this works out. Yeah, we can go even higher with 5, go back and hit it again, 5 millimeters, since this is quite soft. So right click again to select edge fillets again, and the top one should be maybe 2 millimeters. This creates these soft edges of the handle. Next, I want to add some on the low part. So again, this is one of my tricks that I do, just hit the arrow here once, go up 50, and now you'll be able to see underneath. I think 2 millimeters for the low one. Let's see, this should be fine. Now I can click again and type in -50 in order to move it down to the original position. So same with the lid itself. You can also just hide the main model, go to visibility and hide objects. Now we can add those fillets here. So go solid tools again and fillet edges. I think we need now a few smaller ones. So type in 1 millimeter for these inside edges. Then I think a 2 millimeter for this one, since this looks like it's a bit more rounded on this image. So now with this model shown, we can also fillet those small edges. So select all these outside edges as well as those down below with a small radius, 0.2, 0.25, should be fine. And this creates a nice highlight in the end in your renders. The same thing goes with this edge. Here we need to select both edges, or you can just chain those together. So hit C or click up here to chain edges and click once to select this whole edge. Right click and this should round these edges as well. Right, next or last thing for now is to join those two together because they are welded. You don't see really well on those images, but they're welded together. So they have a fillet here as well. So we want to create this fillet. In order to do this, we need to join those together. On the side, you can see that we overextended this spout here. So we want to move this part up a little bit in order to be inside the volume of the can. So what you can do, and that's a nice trick I'm trying to use less often, but it's sometimes just easier to do. Hold down Control and Shift at the same time and drag around those edges. And this will just select anything that's inside your selection. So in this case, these points and these lines. And now we can go to Transform and Move tool and move these along this line upwards into the volume of the can. We could have made a line and cut the rest off, but this just is a bit easier, quicker in the end. So now select both of those volumes, go to Solid Tools and Boolean Union. So you will see that this inside disappears. If we wouldn't have done this, we would have some parts of the spout shooting out here, so we don't want this. Now in the 3D mode, we can go to Solid Tools, Fillet, and fillet this edge. And I think I'm gonna fillet it with 1 millimeter. So type in 1, select the edge, right click, and this should be